Okay. We're talking with Russ Roy of Grafton, Illinois, and the interviewer is James Smither of the Grand Valley State University Veterans History Project. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. Where and in what year were you born?
I was born in 1951, December, in Highland, Illinois, and that's the nearest hospital. I actually lived in a small town about 9 miles east of there in Pocahontas, Illinois.
Okay, what part of the state is that in?
It's considered the southern part or southwest part of the Illinois.
Okay, and did you grow up there or did you move around?
Well, I lived there till I was 10 years old. My parents moved about 30, 40 miles east of there to Vandalia, Illinois. And I've kind of considered that home because that's where I went to high school. And that they moved a couple other periods when I was in 7th and 8th grade, but it was short durations. And somehow we always ended up back in Vandalia.
Okay, and what was your family doing for a living then?
Well, my father died when I was about 3 and a half, 4 years old. My mother remarried, and my stepfather was a Baptist minister. One of the reasons we moved quite a bit, I think. And my mom worked at various jobs and also was a housewife.
Okay, all right. And when did you finish high school?
1969.
Okay, and what did you do after you graduated?
Well, my first year I went to college and kind of realized I just wasn't mature enough or ready for college yet. And the draft was going on, and I had a low enough number that I was probably going to end up getting drafted, and my family had a bit of a history going into the Marine Corps. So that summer I'd been working construction and just really didn't know what to do. And one morning I just woke up and got out of bed, got in my car, and drove to the nearest recruiting station in Centralia, Illinois, and enlisted in the Marine Corps.
Okay, and when did you do that?
That's probably in August of 1970.
Okay.
And I went on a delayed program where you didn't go in for like 45 days or so. And then in October, I got on my first airplane ride and flew to San Diego.
All right. Now, what happens once you arrive in San Diego?
Well, it's a bit scary, I guess is the word, or intimidating for sure. I'll tell you a little story. I was in charge of 2 other guys. I always had somebody that was kind of the leader. So we get off the airplane in San Diego and really didn't know where to go, what to do, so we're just kind of flowing with the crowd. And in the middle of the concourse was a military information desk. So I walked up to the desk and put my arms on it and leaned over, and there's a Marine Corps gunnery sergeant in dress blues. Of course, I didn't know he was a gunnery sergeant at the time. And he says, "Hey, can you tell me where to go?" And he leaned in front of me in a very low voice that no one else could hear and says, "Get your damn arms off my desk." And man, I kind of taken aback, and I thought, boy, I might have made a big mistake with this Marine Corps thing. So anyway, then we get on a bus and they take us over to the recruit depot, which, it's about a 15-minute bus ride, maybe not even that long. You probably have heard of the infamous yellow footprints. So a big old tough drill instructor gets in the bus, starts screaming and yelling, and told us to get out there, and that was the beginning right there. You get on those yellow footprints. They kept us up all night. We go through and get your haircut and the basic issue, they call it. And we spent the rest of the night out on the grinder, which is the drill field, using our sea bags full of clothes and everything as our rifle. And that's where we begin to learn the manual of arms.
All right, they start you right away.
Yes, they do.
Okay, and so how long was the boot camp?
If I remember right, it was 9 weeks, and then from there you went to infantry training up at Camp Pendleton for a 4-week course. And then if you're infantry MOS, if you're going to be in a grunt, as we said, you'd stay at Pendleton probably another 4 to 6 weeks, and those guys shortly after that, most of them are then getting shipped directly to Vietnam back in those days. But I had an aviation MOS, so when I finished infantry training, and by the way, I'm proud to say in my boot camp, I was the highest sharpshooter or rifleman in our company, so that was a kind of an honor I was rather proud of.
So growing up in the country, did you hunt?
I did hunt, and that's what I told the colonel when he gave me the expert medal, that I did a lot of squirrel hunting with 22s, and that's where I learned probably to shoot as good as I did. But I had a good pair of eyes in those days too. So.
Okay, so were you able to request aviation training when you first enlisted, or how did that work?
That was a guarantee that I got from the recruiter.
Okay.
And most people think I'm crazy for this. And after I served my 4 years, I kind of regretted that I really didn't go into the infantry because that's what the Marine Corps is all about. But I'm still proud of what I did in my service.
Okay. So you lined up. So tell us a little bit about what boot camp was like, because most people these days never go through it.
Well, it's an experience, and I've never been to Army or Navy, but everybody says the Marine Corps is the worst, and I think that's probably a true statement. And you're just getting screamed at and yelled at, and what they're doing, they're breaking you down and recreating you and how they want you to think, and they teach you discipline. And I was fairly good shape and rather athletic, so I didn't find it too much of a challenge physically. It was to some degree, but it was the mental aspect that really you got to kind of deal with and get used to. And well, there's probably several things, but back then the Marines, they still kind of physically roughed you up a little bit if they needed to. They kind of gotten away from that from what I understand, but they were still doing it a little bit back in those days. So I got my head bounced around a couple times.
All right. Now, were there guys who just couldn't adjust to that?
Yeah. I forget the exact number. We probably started out with 80 recruits in our platoon. They established you in a platoon. And I'd say 30 of them they didn't get shipped out. They either got sent to additional physical training or disciplinary training. They call them motivation platoons. And some of them, though, they got them shipped out. They just couldn't, they couldn't make it. But I went straight through.
Okay. And then what was Camp Pendleton like?
Well, there you're training to be an infantry guy, so you were doing a lot of humping through the hills of Southern California and that. And so it's pretty hard duty too, but at least you didn't have a drill instructor leaning over you screaming at you all day long. But we call them troop handlers, and they were kind of hard on us as well. But you were a Marine by then, so they treated you as a fellow Marine. And I kind of enjoyed it. Got to shoot the rifle a lot, and got to shoot a machine gun and some of that other stuff.
Did they have you use the M16, or were you still?
Yeah, in boot camp we trained with the M14, but when you got to Pendleton, you got M16s, and that's where I learned about the M16 rifle.
All right. So you do that. Now, where do they send you for the aviation school?
I think there were two main places back in those days. One was Millington, Tennessee, which is just north of Memphis. The other was in Pensacola, Florida, and then Jacksonville too, I think. And being the Marines part of the Navy, they were Navy-run schools. But I went to Millington. My MOS was 6042, which is airframe structures mechanic. And I really don't remember how long I was there, but I was thinking it was 6 to 8 weeks. And then from there, I got orders and went to El Toro.
Okay. So what were they actually teaching you to do?
Well, you learn about naval aviation and different acronyms and some history. Then eventually you get into your skills, and they teach you the basic skills, and then just like any, you get a little more advanced as time goes on.
So was this welding and that sort of thing?
It was working with sheet metal.
Okay.
Drilling holes, using rivets. You learned other type of fasteners. Kind of learned stress patterns, corrosion, how to deal with corrosion. Even some painting, because that falls under that MOS. So that's what we did primarily there.
Okay. And were you going to work on fixed-wing aircraft or helicopters?
Well, you didn't know until you got orders out of Millington, and I was sent to 3rd Marine Air Wing at El Toro, and I ended up at VMA 223, which was an A4 squadron.
Okay. All right. And describe the A4.
It's made by Douglas, single engine. It's a Delta wing, and it was really a good workhorse for that period of time. It's a really good airplane. And while I was there, though, the crazy thing, they needed somebody to go on a special detail up at NAS Alameda, and somehow I got picked. And so I ended up there for 10 months, and what we were doing there was corrosion work on C-130s, Marine Corps C-130s.
Okay. I suppose if a lot of them had been to Vietnam, they might have had some corrosion.
Yeah. Well, just in the naval environment, being around ocean water and salt water, they all had corrosion.
Okay. So did you have a daily routine in these bases?
Well, if you'd want to call it daily, getting up at probably 5:30, 6 o'clock, walking to the chow hall to get breakfast. And back in those days, you you didn't really get paid enough money to afford a car. And they had shuttle buses, and you also hitchhiked a lot, but people were good about picking you up and giving you rides. Because from where the barracks was in El Toro to where our squadron area was in the hangar, that was probably about 2.5, 3 miles. So that's, and then you get to work and whatever. In maintenance control, they'd have a status board, and they'd assign work if the planes needed certain things, or if they needed going into an inspection cycle. And so anyway, you'd get your job assigned. You had a sergeant typically, or staff sergeants in charge of what you call a work center or your shop, and they just give you work to do, and off you went and did it. And then initially, it was a lot of OJT because you're new. And you seldom went out on a job by yourself at first. You always had a more experienced person go with you.
Because in the training, you weren't going to be working on A4s or you were working on C-130s,
right.
So you got to go learn those things. So about how long were you at El Toro before they moved you?
I was probably there about 6 months when I got sent to Alameda, and I was there 10 months and back to El Toro, and it was kind of a short period while I was back there before well, I think it was a short period. I really don't remember for sure, but and then I got sent to Fatima in Okinawa, Japan.
Okay. So while you're still in California, you said you didn't have a car.
No.
Could you get off base and do things?
Yeah, you always had a buddy or two that had cars, and so you'd go off base and do what typical young guys do. One, see the sights and the scenery, and then you'd end up, trying to pick up girls or go drinking and things of that nature.
That sort of stuff. Were there particular towns that you would normally go into?
Mainly Santa Ana,
okay.
California.
All right. So where is it? El Toro? Is that towards San Diego, or is that farther up?
And that's right outside Santa Ana, so it's closer to the L.A. metropolitan area.
Okay.
Then.
All right. And again, Alameda is kind of in that general area.
No, Alameda's up in the Bay Area.
Bay Area. Okay.
By Oakland and so.
Okay. And the people in these communities, were they reasonably welcoming to military personnel, or?
Well, if they were connected to the military, they were. But if they weren't at that time, everybody has talked about it. The Vietnam War was not popular. The military became kind of unpopular. You were the symbol of the war, I guess. And so they weren't that friendly to you in those days. And you really stood out because in those days, long hair was in fashion, and here you're with a buzz cut, kind of like I got now. And so you stood out.
All right. Now, did you enjoy the work? Was that?
Yeah, I pretty much did. Yeah.
Okay. But were you looking forward to getting an overseas assignment?
Yes, I was. In fact, I was, growing up in a small town in the country, and that you don't know a lot of things. You're pretty naive. So I thought my orders you just see orders come up for Vietnam, and I never saw them. I checked because I was wanting to get experience and see the world. But I thought I'd go to Vietnam and do my thing for the country. Well, then later somebody says, well, the orders don't say Vietnam. They say either 1st Marine Air Wing, Iwakuni, or 3rd Marine Division in Okinawa. And I said, really? He said, yeah. And I said, well, I see those all the time. He said, well, that's how you're going to get to Vietnam. So I saw one, and I ended up in Okinawa, and I could go on from there where I went.
Okay.
But
when did you go to Okinawa?
probably around March of 1973.
Okay. So by then, the Nixon's peace with honor has been announced, and most of the remaining American personnel getting taken out of Vietnam.
It was winding down.
Yeah.
But then, if you also remember, there was a couple flare-ups, and I don't remember. You're the history professor. I don't remember too well, but so the Marine Corps moved a Marine Air Group out of Iwakuni to this isolated base in northeast Thailand called Nampong, and we lived in tents. Eventually, the Seabees came in and built some hooches, but they were attacking the Cambodian Laos insurgents in that part of the country.
Okay, that's a little bit farther down the line. So let's back. That's fine. Okay, so let's back up a little bit. So you go out and you get to. First of all, how do they get you out to Okinawa?
There was charter jet airplanes run by charter company. So I flew out of I think it was Norton, and flew to let's see, Alaska, Elmendorf. We stopped there to refuel. Then from there we went to Yokota, which is an Air Force base in mainland Japan. And then from Yokota they flew us to Kadena Air Force Base on Okinawa. And then from there they bussed us over to the Fatima Marine Corps Air Station.
All right. And so what was the Fatima station like? Describe it.
Which one, Fatima?
Yeah.
It's, you know, the city grew up around where the airfield was, so we were surrounded by the villagers or townspeople. And it was a helicopter base. The only fixed wing were C-130s. Jets and that did not land there or anything. And the people were friendly enough, from what I remember. And I kind of enjoyed my time, but it was right after conversion when we turned the island back over to Japanese government.
Mm-hmm.
And prices were what used to be really reasonable. It was getting to be expensive, and it's just not a really super great time to be there. And the Okinawans really, probably more Japan than Okinawans, but they wanted the Americans off the island. They still do to this day. So,
well, they've been there a long time.
they have been there a long time.
Yeah. All right. And so what kind of work would you do on the C-130s?
Well, when I was on the corrosion program in Alameda, we just did inspections, and then you grind out the corrosion, because corrosion's kind of like a cancer. If you don't get all of it, it'll come back. And then there was artisans from the depot. It was the Naval Aviation Depot in Alameda where we were doing this. So their artisans were skilled at doing more complicated repairs and that. So they'd have an engineer design a repair, then they would install it. We were there kind of just to help and observe a lot of it.
All right. And then while you were in Okinawa, are there particular things that happened or memories that kind of stand out for you?
No. Well, I guess we were at the club one day, and this was towards the end of my tour in Okinawa. I'd already been to Thailand and back to Okinawa. We get a notification I said, Sergeant Roy, you have a phone call. So I went to the club, or answered the phone. It was our gunnery sergeant. He says, you got to report back to your duty area and go get a sea bag. And within 3 or 4 hours, I found myself on a C-141 heading to the Philippines. There's about 7 of us that got selected to go. And what it was, we were putting in a modification to the helicopters for flare dispensers and chaff dispensers, because they were getting ready to go into Phnom Penh to evacuate the civilians, American citizens. And so next thing I know, I'm on an amphibious ship, and we're heading towards the Gulf of Thailand, and we sat out there for about 3 weeks, and then I guess the threat of it subsided, and we ended up going back to Subic Bay. So that was kind of exciting.
All right. And then you also have the Detour in Thailand. So can I talk about that?
Yeah, they needed a person to go to Thailand, so I asked, where was this place and some things. And I said, well, I'll go. Sounds interesting. So they flew us in there on a C-130. It took forever, it felt like. And we flew over Vietnam to get to the base. And it was a bare base, just tense and hot. And, they had probably a Marine company there for security, a Marine rifle company. But after you got settled in that, other than kind of the rough living conditions, that was good duty too.
Okay. Now, was this fairly far north in Thailand, or?
Very far northeast.
Yeah.
And the Air Force had a base called NKP. I can't remember now what that really stood for, but we were pretty far away from, like Bangkok, and that town called Udon Thani was the largest base or largest city in the area. And the Air Force had a base there. It was Udon.
Yeah.
And the Air Force had probably 5 or 6 bases in Thailand during Vietnam. But while I was over there, I'd actually injured my knee when I was in Alameda. And I tore my ACL and some meniscus. And the Navy doctors didn't do anything. I had the Oakland Naval Hospital right close by and everything, so it'd go out on me a couple times. Then while I was in Thailand, I was climbing up on the helicopter and it went out on me again. I fell off the helicopter. So they medevaced me to Clark Air Base in the Philippines from Thailand. And I was there at the hospital about 6 weeks. They did surgery and during a recovery period. And I really was surprised they sent me back to Thailand. I said, I can't believe you're sending me back into the jungle. And so anyway, that's where they sent me. I wasn't much used to the outfit for about 6 months after that. And actually, I ended up going back to, they were pulling us out. August the 15th, there was some kind of a treaty or negotiation. And August the 15th, starting literally the next day, they were flying C-141s and C-5s into Nampong to pull out that Marine Air Group. We were literally gone within a couple of weeks.
Was that 74?
That was still, that would have been August of 73.
Okay. All right. So you had, because I guess you said you arrived in Okinawa in 73, but maybe you arrived in 72?
No, I got there in March of 73, if my memory serves me right, and I was there about 2 months, so it had been about April or so. I went to Thailand, and I'd been there about 6 weeks, which would have taken me into May, I guess. Then 6 weeks in recovery, so I got back to Thailand probably mid to late July.
Okay, so I guess before you were talking about months. So
yeah.
Then I got a little bit confused on that. But okay, this is why you have an interview.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, okay. So you kind of had a sort of busy time back and forth.
Yeah. And like I said, I liked the adventure of it. And so things came up that they needed volunteers. I'd usually raise my hand and say, I'll go.
Okay. Now, when you were in Thailand, were there villages or towns around?
Where we were at, there was some villages, and I was with a helicopter detachment because that's what Okinawa had, and we were providing. There was 3 CH-46 helicopters. It was we called it Detachment Delta, and we were flying search and rescue missions for the fixed wing aircraft.
Okay.
And we never had to go rescue anybody, but we'd get to fly around the villages, because you still had to fly the helicopters around. And even though I wasn't a crew chief or crew member, they'd let you go flying with them, and so it was pretty nice.
Okay. And did you go out in the civilian population much, or stay in the base?
Not much. There was a couple nightclubs that some civilians ran, but it was right next to the base, and in fact, they might even still been on part of the base. I can't really remember, but no, we wouldn't. They didn't let us go out into the villages. And about every 6 weeks, you'd get to go to Udorn and get I think it was probably a 36 or 48-hour pass. So we didn't get to get out and see a lot.
So did Udorn just have better facilities?
Well, it was a bigger town. You got to go out in the town and everything, and I guess they felt it was safer because the Air Force had a huge presence there. And like any typical Air Force base, a wing of Air Force personnel, you're talking 5,000 to 10,000 people typically.
Okay. Were there any concerns about guerrilla activity?
Yes, there was. I mean, we had Thai guards, and they had little outposts or bunkers, whatever, every 100 yards or so. Then we also had the Marine, I'm assuming it was an infantry company, and they had their own positions scattered around. The Thais were right outside the wire, and our Marine guys were right inside the wire. So, but yeah, there was definitely a military presence where you could be expecting, combat or guerrillas or whatever.
Okay. And did you ever hear of any of that happening while you were there?
No.
Because that was one of the big fears, was that the
Yes.
communists would spill over into Thailand and keep going. But that kind of doesn't happen. All right. Now, while you're in these places, are you kind of following the news, or do you just get sent someplace and then find out maybe what you're doing there?
Well, the main news source in those days was the Stars and Stripes magazine, and I think you got those once a week. And you could maybe pick up the Armed Forces radio network on your radio if you had some radios and that. And it's funny, you see them today, you know, they're connected via the internet, and everybody's got a laptop over there and they're Zooming or FaceTiming with loved ones. And back then it was still the old letter writing. So I'd write letters, and I didn't write a lot, but I probably wrote my parents. And I initially had a girlfriend, but like a lot of guys, that goes to the wayside. So I just mainly family members who I'd write letters to.
Right. Now, while you're overseas, did they ever give you an R&R?
No.
Okay.
I wasn't there long enough. And in fact, I don't know what the time.
Okay, so before the battery decided to quit on us, we're going to be talking about your stay in Thailand, and I think that we had probably gotten through most of that
Okay.
at this point. And we talked a little bit, we talked about security questions, we talked about the kind of work that you were doing there on that base, we talked about how you kind of moved back and forth between Okinawa and Thailand, the Philippines, and back to Thailand, and then you go back to Okinawa to finish out that tour.
That's correct.
All right. Just this a little bit. There. Okay. There we go. Yeah. All right. So, now if you think back about that time overseas in these different places, are there other particular memories or events that kind of stand out? What do you think of when you think of those places?
No, not particularly. I mean, I always found the people to be very nice, and for the most part. And Thailand people were exceptionally nice. And the Okinawans, the native Okinawans typically were very nice. So, and the Filipinos were nice. That's the three main countries I actually spent time in.
Now, there's lots of stories about Americans in those places, you know, having girlfriends or getting drunk and smashing up bars and things like that. Were you aware of any of that, or was your group just not doing that kind of thing?
Well, we didn't really do it. I mean, we'd go out and get drunk and that, but we pretty much behaved ourselves. I mean, I was in a couple little barroom fights myself, but nothing significant. But I'll say this, race relations in the military during that time, the early 70s and mid-70s, were really bad. And I saw basically a race riot on El Toro while I was there. I saw one at Okinawa and Fatima, and then one at the base in Thailand.
Okay.
And you could just sense that trouble was brewing. And I'm like, we're getting out of here, you know, or I'm getting out of here, because you just didn't want to have any part of it. You know, you don't want a bunch of Marines who are trained to kill anyway to start getting in a big nasty brawl. You know.
Okay. And it did tend to be the combat soldiers who did that, or
it was
anybody?
Yeah. It's just what I remember of it. And I'm not trying to single out, but you know, the black Marines and that. That was the time they'd see a guy like in the chow line, and they'd do their knuckle rapping and handshake, and it was kind of aggravating because, man, some of it would take 30 seconds, 40 seconds, and they do it 3 or 4 guys, and you're trying to go through the chow line to get something to eat, and it would just really aggravate a lot of the white guys. And I don't think the Marine Corps, probably nor the Army, did a good job of handling that back in the day. So.
It took a while to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, in the combat units in the field, they report that usually it's not a problem because you need each other. But you get back to the rear, or you get on the bases, then more what's going on at home carries over in the military.
And it was on both sides, blacks and whites. I mean, you had your instigators, but that's not saying I had some great black Marines that I was friends with, and I would count on and depend upon, and so.
Now, if they were kind of mechanics or people with specialized skills, were they more likely to be people you get along with and work with, or? Yeah,
probably so.
Okay. Yeah. The other kind of stereotype about that era is drug use in the military. And did you see any of that?
I did see some. You know, I was never into that. Didn't want to become part of it. I got my relaxation, I guess, just through hanging out at the club, drinking beer and that. And I said, I don't need anything else. This is good enough for me. because I saw how it really controlled some of the people where they actually started to become addicted in that.
Yeah. Well, there was a phase there for a while where heroin was widely available. And it was worse probably back around 1971 when all those rock stars were dying. They were getting this, because we had moved into Cambodia and shut down the outlets for all of that stuff, and so they just started sending it to Vietnam. But whatever else. But anyway, so that was bad. Yeah, but that may have been better under control by the time you were there.
Yeah, I don't remember serious things like heroin or not.
Yeah. So mostly marijuana at that point?
Yeah, I would say, yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, you're getting toward the end of your enlistment. Do you get sent back to California again for the last part?
No, my last duty assignment was at Marine Corps Air Station Yuma. And I had probably roughly 6 months left in my contract. And again, I was assigned to the headquarters squadron, they called it, and we just maintained some airplanes that were assigned to the base, like about 3 UE helicopters, a couple of, I think they were called S2s as a naval plane, and we worked, there was both Navy and Marine Corps personnel, so we had some sailors in the shop that we all got along. It was a good assignment. Just hot.
Okay. What rank were you by then?
I was a sergeant at that time.
So when did you get up to sergeant?
I got a promotion in Thailand while I was there, and that's when and then I was meritoriously promoted to corporal, and I don't remember what year that was. But I made rank relatively fast, and but I'd like to what I call a squared away Marine. I stayed out of trouble and did my job and worked hard. In fact, I was complimented more than once by my superiors that I was just a really good, hard-working Marine.
Okay. And then, so when you're in Yuma, so Yuma, Arizona, okay. Do you have a car by then, or were you?
No, I did not own it. I owned a car briefly when I first got in, and I had it down at Millington, and I forget what we got paid in those days, but it wasn't very much. And it didn't take me long to realize I couldn't afford it, and I still had some car payments. They were low, but we didn't get much.
Yeah.
Between gas, insurance, and car payments, I got rid of my car. I just couldn't afford it, so I just did the rest of 4 years without a car.
All right. And then you're getting to the end of your hitch. Did you consider re-enlisting?
I did, because I enjoyed the Marine Corps. And we had a career planner that was kind of new, and he wasn't working with me. He just wanted me to sign up, and I said, no, I kind of know how that works, and if you don't get it in writing, you're guaranteeing me a school or new MOS that you'll just forget all about it once I sign up. And at the same time, an interesting story while I was in Yuma, our dispersing company, which is our payroll, said I was overpaid while I was at the Clark Air Base, and I knew exactly what was wrong, and they wouldn't listen to me, so they put me on health and comfort items. So for about 2 months, all they would give me is about every 2 weeks I'd get like $15, and that's just to buy soap and deodorant and toothpaste. So I requested mast, which is going up through your superiors, your chain of command, and I got up to the station commander, a bird colonel at Yuma, told him my story, and he said, well, I'm sure the major at dispersing knows what he's doing, and I'm sure he's right. And I said, okay, sir. So I was pretty frustrated by then, so I went home that night back to the barracks, and I wrote a letter to my state representative or U.S. representative in Illinois and the senator at the time. Within about 10 days, I got a letter from a colonel in the Pentagon saying they were doing a full audit on my pay records and that. Then a couple of weeks later, I get a call from dispersing. They paid me about 2 months back pay of what they were holding, because I knew what it was, like I said. And anyway, kind of turned me a little sour against the Marine Corps at the time, that they didn't stand behind me any better than they did. And with what the career planner was doing, I said, nah, I'm getting out. So I got out.
So once you got out, what did you do?
Well, I went back to school for a while, and finally I realized, I got exposed to aviation. I'm going to go to an aviation maintenance technology school. And they had one in Belleville, Illinois at a junior college. So I got my A&P and an associate degree, and worked a couple odd jobs, not odd jobs, but smaller jobs in the aviation field. And I got laid off 2 different times. And I was kind of getting frustrated, didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine said, go over to McDonnell Douglas there in St. Louis, which is now Boeing. He says, they're hiring, I bet you'd get a job. And sure enough, he was right. I went over there, and within 4 weeks, I got called in for an interview and a job offer. And almost 36 years later, I retired from Boeing. So it opened up my career in aviation for my civilian life.
Okay.
And I feel very blessed by it all. I had a really good career.
All right. And did you get involved with veterans groups?
Yes, I do, especially the American Legion. I haven't always been active in the Legion, but in the last 15 years, I've been very active in the American Legion, especially at the post that we have here in Grafton.
Okay. Now, you've also gotten involved with this scheme to create a national memorial of military ascent here in Grafton, which is going to have 12 life-size bronze figures scaling the cliffs here, just as the Rangers scaled the cliffs in Normandy at Montreal, which is a pretty remarkable thing to do, but it's a project that's well underway. So what's your connection to that, or what role are you playing?
Well, I entered politics here, I guess you'd call it, but anyway, I became a city alderman, and our mayor, Mike Morrow, he is the co-chairman of this project, and he talked to me about it, and he asked me if I wanted to be on the committee or commission, and he put me on their fundraising commission, and I just found it another new challenge. And my thought with my connections at Boeing and that I'd be able to draw in maybe a big donation from Boeing, but so far that has borne no fruit. Of course, Boeing's got problems these days. But then I came up with an idea one day, the American Legion, getting an article written or approaching the convention, and so I started making some phone calls to our state office, and next thing you know, our former, who's our state adjutant now, used to be the former national commander of the American Legion. He took interest in it, kind of gave me some direction on getting a resolution passed. Put me in contact with the editor of the American Legion magazine, and they did an article on it back in this past June. So we've gotten a lot of momentum out of that, and I'm hoping to continue that momentum, and I'm hopefully going to see some donations coming in from the various Legion posts, especially in the state of Illinois.
Okay. All right. Now, to look back over your time in the service, how do you think that affected you, or what did you learn from it?
Well, it, for sure, without a doubt, gave me some discipline that was sorely lacking in my life, and it gave me a better, more self-confidence in myself. To, you just apply yourself and stay focused, and you also learn you got to work with people, and you just can't do it on your own. And so I wouldn't trade my 4 years for anything, and then, like, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it all over again. Maybe not the same MOS or anything, but I would definitely join the Marine Corps again.
All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing the story today.
Well, you're more than welcome. Thank you.